Welcome to Film Focus. If you love romantic tales, please help us reach Mo9 subscribers. Now, Allison was clearly giving them a chance on purpose, letting two men vie for her heart with everything they had. Yet, in her solitude, she kept them longing, lingering on the edge of hope. She could feel her own heart stirring for them both, but her soul was set on the poetry of distant horizons. It wasn't that she sought to toy with their affections, nor was she turning away from the promise of a true, deep love. But why did she hesitate so long to choose the one she would walk with for the rest of her days? Why is it that when love finally bloomed, she could only think of running as far away as her heart could take her? It all began with a betrayal she never saw coming, one that would shatter her world and change her life forever. The man she had loved for 5 long years ended up losing his heart to her very own sister. Anyone else would have spent endless nights drowned in tears, but Allison kept a gentle, lingering smile upon her face. She even found the strength to attend their wedding, offering them her sincerest blessings with a grace that masked her pain. One might have thought that she was truly brave enough to face such a cruel betrayal, but a week later, she quietly sold everything she owned, and bought an RV to leave it all behind. She told herself she needed to see the world, to find the western lands where her mother once lived and breathed. She bid farewell to the sister who couldn't understand her sudden departure, and carrying only her memories and her dreams, she set out on a journey into the unknown. The breathtaking vistas along the road wrapped around her like a gentle, warm embrace. They whispered to her soul, trying to mend her shattered heart, as she drifted across 1,000 miles, guided by fate, until, without warning, her engine fell silent, and her journey was forced into a sudden, quiet pause. Exhausted, she lay back and waited for a sign, for help, but the one who found her there was a kind soul, just passing through the wilderness. They asked her with such genuine concern what had happened, but his kindness only served as a painful reminder of the love she lost, so she turned him away with a few hurried words, wanting only to be alone. But the car just slowly pulled over to the side of the road. Hank said that he couldn't just leave a woman all alone in the middle of the wilderness. Based on his years of experience, the most likely reason the truck stalled was a broken water pump. Just as they were wondering what to do next, the tow truck finally arrived. It would take about a week to fix. The driver would tow the truck to town for repairs, and suggested that she go with Hank to the ranch, to stay there for the time being. It seemed like the best option for now. Although she was quite hesitant to accept such kindness, she had no choice but to follow the man and his mother. They traveled across the vast, open wilderness, sharing stories of what they had seen along the way with a quiet ease. As they got to know each other a little better, Hank was surprised to discover that this woman, Allison, dared to travel to such a remote place all by herself. She said she was there for her reporting assignment. She could have easily taken a plane or a train, instead of driving all this way with everything she owned. But to make her journey feel more meaningful, she pulled out a precious photograph. She felt a pang of regret, not knowing where the photo was taken. Hank quietly took her words to heart. No matter where her final destination might be, the thought of Allison traveling alone in such danger was something Hank simply couldn't ignore. He showed her how the water and electricity worked, and how she could get online. Allison settled in comfortably. Now, all she had to do was wait a week for her truck, but the long journey ahead still felt so daunting. How could a woman from the bustling city be here just for a simple story? As evening fell and it was time for dinner, Hank invited Allison to join them in an hour for a family meal. That simple, casual thank you might have truly touched her heart. Allison wasn't the only one living on the ranch. Nearby, there was a couple who also lived in a camper. With kind eyes, the couple greeted their new neighbor. They were more than willing to help her in any way they could, but seeing the deep affection they shared only brought back memories of Allison's ex-boyfriend. Her broken heart began to ache with a familiar pain, but what felt even heavier was her best friend, Chloe, calling constantly to check on her. She kept saying how worried she was. She even offered to fly out just to help her, but Allison refused her immediately. She didn't need any of that. Not right now. Yet, Allison's heart wasn't made of ice. When she heard that the couple next door had lived on the ranch for 37 years, and were still deeply in love, a tiny flicker of hope for love stirred within her again. After all, they were living proof that not every love ends in betrayal. But where was the love she so desperately craved? Hearing that Allison was all alone and single, with no real home and no steady job, the kind old man gestured for his son to hold on to this beautiful woman. Even the little daughter was being so sweet and well-behaved, all for the sake of her single father's future happiness. Hank could feel the warmth of their silent encouragement, and he wasn't entirely indifferent to her, either. He had only ever known feelings that were fleeting, nothing more than the cruel tricks of desire. He knew that only a love that could withstand the trials would be the love he truly longed for, and that kind of love, it takes a long time to truly take root. They agreed to meet the following morning, but tonight, the night felt longer than it ever had before, even though Allison still didn't understand why her ex had left her, but it was finally time for her to let go, and open her heart to love once more. Yet, with a heart so heavily scarred, she wasn't quite sure how to begin. Perhaps if she just kept a smile on her face, everything would eventually fall into place. However, on this evening, as a gentle breeze whispered through the air, she crossed paths with a ruggedly handsome man. His striking features and those deep, soulful eyes unwittingly stirred something deep within Allison's heart. That sudden, breathtaking flutter lingered all the way until the following morning. Hank cheerfully told his brother that he had fallen for a truly beautiful woman. This time, it felt different from anything he'd ever known. He was truly serious this time, for he couldn't get her out of his mind. He longed, more than anything, to win her affection. To him, love was a flame that needed to be fanned while it was hot. One must strive to pursue it whenever the chance arises, lest a missed moment becomes a lifetime of regret. The moment the chores on the ranch were finished, he couldn't wait a second longer to go and see her. His sweet, tender words reached the very depths of her soul. She never expected that this man, whom she found so charming, would be so bold and forward with his feelings. Hank told her that if she ever needed a helping hand, he would be there for her, anytime, anywhere. As the realization finally dawned on her, she understood that he was just as captivated by her. She wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. There was, in fact, one thing she had been longing to do, and that was to volunteer at the local community center. But the ranch was a fair distance from the town. Hank didn't want to just take the truck, for he had a stable of strong, spirited horses. Riding to town together on horseback would mean more precious moments spent by Allison's side. But originally, this morning, Allison was supposed to tour the ranch with Hank's brother. However, she had just made a promise to go volunteering on horseback. A flicker of disappointment crossed Hank's face. But if they all went to town together, no one's feelings would have to be hurt. Yet, this was merely Allison's wishful thinking. Trying to please two men at once was simply unrealistic. Feeling helpless, she mounted her horse, ready to depart. But then, a photograph slipped out of her backpack. She followed Hank's brother, completely unaware of what had happened, as they set off on the long road toward town. The observant Hank caught sight of the fallen photo. He remembered the place captured in that picture. Visiting it had always been Allison's deepest wish. If he could just follow this clue, he might still have a chance. But Hank's brother was a man of great romantic experience. In every word and every subtle gesture, he knew exactly how to capture a woman's heart. When it came to pursuing a woman so shy, he knew he had to put in more effort to bring her joy and keep her spirits bright. But Allison's true joy was found behind her camera lens, capturing the breathtaking beauty she had come to love. Hank's brother didn't want to disturb Allison while she was focused, so he lowered his head, tending to the horses as they grazed. Little did he know, Allison had already turned her camera toward him. She secretly snapped several photos of him. They lost track of time, and soon it was too late to head to town. Seeing the two of them returning so leisurely, Hank felt a sharp pang of bitterness in his heart. Throughout his long day of grueling labor, he couldn't stop wondering if Allison had already fallen for his brother. When he noticed that Allison was a bit unsteady on her feet after the ride, his jealousy was clouded by a touch of anger. He sternly ordered his brother to finish the rest of the dirty work, and then, he gently escorted Allison back home. Seeing the woman he loved hobbling along with every step, his heart ached as he pulled out a chair for her. But little did he know, she had been dwelling on her promise all day long, and as he feared, there was no room for him in Allison's heart at that moment. Feeling like a defeated man, he forced a smile and quietly withdrew from her sight. But he wasn't ready to truly give up just yet. Instead, he rode out into the fading glow of the sunset, relying on every memory he had of these mountains since he was a boy. He actually managed to find that needle in a haystack, the backdrop from the photo. It felt as though, for the very first time, he had truly found a way into Allison's heart. Now, All he needed was an opportunity. But after finally enduring the long, restless night, at breakfast the next morning, he realized Allison was nowhere to be found. After asking around, he learned that because Allison had spent the whole day riding, her legs were still incredibly sore and aching. She couldn't even walk the ranch trails, and was confined to the area around her trailer. This was all because Hank hadn't considered this possibility, and he really needed to reflect on that. At the same time, he had to make up for not working at 1 o'clock yesterday by doing some extra chores as restitution. As for bringing Allison her breakfast, that task was given entirely to Hank, and just like that, Hank found his chance. He happily went to deliver the breakfast, only to be greeted warmly by Allison. She even brewed him a steaming cup of coffee. But as he followed Allison into the trailer, Hank caught sight of a row of his own photos hanging there. Only then did he realize Allison was already deeply drawn to the younger brother. If Hank didn't show his true feelings soon, he would only be left with a heart full of regret once she was gone. However, he simply handed back the photo that had fallen, only to receive a polite thank you in return. But this made Allison want to repay Hank's kindness, so she insisted on helping out with the ranch work, no matter what. But Porter couldn't bear to see her struggle. He took over the tedious, mundane chores like carrying water and feeding the horses. Then, he suddenly had the idea to teach her how to use a lasso. The joy of roping brought them closer, and their bond began to deepen. Their cheerful laughter drew a small crowd of onlookers, but it also caught Hank's attention. Allison noticed Hank watching them. When she finally managed to rope the steer's head, she was so thrilled that she threw her arms around Porter in a hug. But then she realized that Hank, who had been standing there just a moment ago, had suddenly vanished. In an instant, her excitement faded away. On such a beautiful morning, Allison felt a strange sense of unease. However, Martha saw right through it all. She said he just wasn't ready to face his feelings yet, since they didn't make it to town on time last time. Hank happened to be heading out for supplies today. He didn't mind taking Allison along to check on her truck at the repair shop. Of course, she couldn't have asked for more. Yet, Allison was still clearly troubled. She felt that her playful flirting with Porter while roping had somehow hurt Hank. She offered a shy, sincere apology for it. It turned out things weren't as tense as she had feared. Allison's anxious heart finally found some peace. She followed Hank to the service center to check on the progress of her truck. They were told it would still be a few days before it was fixed, but strangely, neither of them seemed very happy about that. With some free time on her hands, Allison wanted to volunteer at the town's community service center. This was how Hank learned about her life as a reporter, who was usually busy from dawn until dusk with her stories. She rarely had time to build deep, personal connections, but Hank didn't mind her presence at all. He was more than willing to spend his time by Allison's side, caring for the elderly. In that warm atmosphere, filled with laughter and joy, he finally began to truly understand why Allison loved her work so much, and why she never found it tedious or dull. It was because she treated everyone she met as if they were family. Since she could find such a sense of purpose here, why must she venture off into the unknown all alone? But Allison's answer remained clear. She was like a beautiful mystery he couldn't quite grasp, still determined to reach the furthest edges of the West. Perhaps it was Allison's solitary, brave journey that so deeply fascinated Hank, who had never left the ranch. Since she was so intent on leaving, he could only offer her his most heartfelt blessings, and treasure the precious moments they had left together. Yet, some believed that as long as she hadn't departed, there was still a chance she might stay. The little girl wanted to create an opportunity for her stubborn father. She pleaded with him, her eyes full of hope, to help with a favor. As the beautiful, soft music began to play, they tried to master a few basic dance steps, moving gracefully to the rhythm of the melody. They tried to find their shared harmony, but the difference in their height made it hard to get the steps right. So the little girl asked her father to join in and practice. Unable to refuse the longing in the little girl's eyes, Hank shyly reached out his hand. The very moment his hand gently brushed against Allison's, a tingling spark left them both feeling a rush of shyness. But as they began to sway slowly to the music, their steps became steady, moving in perfect, silent accord. For the first time, Allison felt her heart truly stir for the man standing before her. This was a different kind of passion than the wildfire she had experienced before. What Hank offered was a sense of steady, quiet comfort, and this tender moment was witnessed by Robert, who happened to be passing by. He stood there, aching with the wish that he was the one dancing with Allison inside, but he felt so alone, with no one to stand by his side. Unlike Hank, who was so well loved by everyone, not only did his little girl offer her support, but even his his elderly father, stepped in to offer a few words of encouragement. But Allison, through the gentle brush of their bodies, and the silent, lingering language of their eyes, could deeply feel the sincerity in Hank's heart. She couldn't deny the truth. She loved the way she felt whenever she was with Hank. Yet, why did a shadow of worry cloud Hank's brow? Though he had grown so fond of Allison, he knew the woman he loved would eventually have to leave. In the end, he would be the only one left with a broken heart. Allison woke up early the next morning. For the first time, she sought Hank out on her own. She wanted to learn more about the ranch, but in truth, she wanted to know more about the man himself. Rather than focusing on the horses in the stables, her eyes were drawn to the wall, to those old photographs, weathered by the passing years. These thin, fragile slips of paper were the bridge to the most vulnerable parts of Hank's soul, because each image had been a pillar for Hank, helping him through the agonizing loss of his late wife. Every memory gave him the strength to keep going and raise his daughter. Allison, too, carried the weight of missing her family. After her mother passed away, her father had left home. She and her sister were left to rely only on each other. Yet, she had left her sister behind to travel so far alone. There must be a hidden reason behind such a fate. Hank could feel it, that perhaps Allison wasn't really trying to reach the far west, but rather, she had long ago lost her way. Because of this, Hank wanted her to stay, and he couldn't let his playboy brother, Porter, break Allison's heart. But Porter had been harboring resentment for days, so he proposed a horse racing bet. Whoever won the race would get to spend the entire day with Allison. The loser would have to do double the ranch chores. And so, for the sake of the same woman, the two brothers, riding their horses, charged toward the finish line. Yet, to everyone's surprise, Hank, who was usually never one for competition, managed to cross the finish line first at the very last second. According to their wager, he now had the entire day to spend with her. For the first time, Hank took the lead in pursuing Allison. He prepared a special surprise, packing warm clothes and photography gear. They journeyed through the breathtaking scenery. Though he didn't possess his brother's way with words, or a silver tongue to charm her heart, there was a much deeper connection between him and Allison. Their brief exchanges along the way seemed ordinary, yet they were filled with a gentle sense of peace. Before they knew it, they had reached their destination, but it appeared to be just an ordinary, empty field, hardly worth such a long journey. Yet, the place began to look more and more familiar to Allison. Trembling, she pulled out that old photograph, looking at it again and again, searching her memories. A wave of pure joy surged within her heart. Allison could hardly believe it. Hank had fulfilled the one wish she had always regretted. This beautiful surprise gave her a newfound sense of hope for the life ahead, because Hank had walked into her world, and stepped right into her life. They sat together, soaking in the quiet of the night, making wishes on the shooting stars that danced across the sky, falling in love, as if it were written in the stars, feeling a deep connection bloom within a single kiss. But Allison suddenly pulled away from the intimacy. His actions still felt like a mystery. She had just received some good news. The truck had been repaired a few days ahead of schedule. She could leave at any moment, or she could choose to stay, to choose the one she would spend the rest of her life with. Even though Hank brought a sense of warm comfort, Robert brought a surge of heart-pounding passion. She cared for both of these men, but deep down, she knew she only had one heart to give. She understood that true love needs time to grow deep, that an attraction is just a fleeting spark, but that spark is where the journey of love begins. She didn't want things to be difficult, or for the two of them to get hurt because of her. So, she kept the news of the repaired truck locked in her heart. Without realizing when it started, she found herself caught in a deeply agonizing dilemma, because once a choice is made, there is no turning back, no room for regret. Instead, her time spent volunteering brought her a sense of peace and relief. She had formed so many meaningful bonds with the patients. The director even hoped she would stay on permanently. She felt herself becoming more and more attached to this place. She shared all her recent doubts with a neighbor, but the neighbor told her she must listen to her own heart, because no one else could ever decide her fate for her. However, her time at the ranch was slowly running out, and Robert was starting to lose his patience. Beneath the brilliance of the night sky, he used the eternal light of the stars to praise Allison's beauty, but he wasn't the only one who could stir her heart. He, too, longed for a love that would remain eternal and unchanging. His feelings for Allison had never been so intense, so profoundly special. Allison was beginning to feel a sense of weariness. She knew Robert wanted to love her with all his heart, but Allison still couldn't bring herself to make a choice, not just yet. And so, the moments continued to slip away. Then, as feared, A shadow fell over their peace, because Robert hadn't received the loving response he sought from Allison the night before. He was so heartbroken that he forgot to latch the stable doors. This gave Hank a reason to lash out in frustration. And just like that, these two, who had always stood side by side through thick and thin, found themselves quarreling over such a trivial mistake. It was a bitter, hollow feeling for both of them, knowing that Allison would be leaving the ranch tomorrow, and they felt utterly powerless to stop her. They were losing someone before their story had even truly begun. Their elderly father. Upon learning that the two of them were at odds over a woman, he was filled with a deep sense of disappointment. In their family, winning a woman's heart was never about sitting idly on a sofa, lost in a daze. It was never about waiting for luck to bring her back, or gambling away the rest of one's life on a whim. Hank found a spark of courage in his father's words, yet he still wasn't sure exactly what he should do. When the sun rose the following morning. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe to Film Focus to help us reach more subscribers. Allison began packing the photographs she'd taken during her stay. A certain someone crossed her mind. There were words she knew she just had to tell him. She searched every corner of the ranch until she finally found Hank. She told him the real reason she had fled the city. It was because her ex-boyfriend had married her own sister. She hadn't meant to keep it a secret. It was simply a wound that was still too painful to touch. She had once believed that she possessed a love that was true, only to find, in the end, it was all just a fleeting dream. It had taken her a long time to learn how to forgive, but it was finally time for her to seek her own path to happiness. She couldn't bear the thought that her arrival might shatter the peace of this beautiful family. So, with a heavy heart, she made a difficult choice. Yet, this wasn't the answer he had been hoping for. But when you choose to leave, you must carry the weight of regret. She gathered up all her belongings, and said a tender goodbye to the sweet little girl. With a lingering gaze, she bid a reluctant farewell to the neighbors. Suddenly, she heard the sheepdog let out a sharp bark. Following the dog's urgent gaze, she saw the neighbor's husband moving slowly, his face contorted in pain. He said a horse had kicked him hard in the arm. Allison quickly realized it was likely a fracture. She applied ice and carefully splinted the injury. She prepared to drive the old man to town for medical treatment. And just like that, Allison was granted a little more time, a few more precious moments for the two brothers of the ranch, and a glimmer of hope that grew just a bit stronger. Yet, Hank was still drowning in his own regret. He felt he had failed to grasp that one last, fleeting chance. With a heavy brow, he went about cleaning the stables, never imagining that his brother would come to find him. Nor did he expect that his brother had decided to step aside, for his brother had finally seen the truth clearly, that he had never truly found a place in Allison's world. He was merely spinning in circles, chasing a fleeting passion, while Hank and Allison shared a connection that touched their very souls. But it felt as though everything was already too late. He didn't realize that Allison hadn't truly left him yet. It wasn't that the opportunity was gone. It was that he had let it slip away far too many times. He could no longer just be a passive observer of his own life. He had to tell Allison exactly how he felt, no matter the outcome. He wouldn't back down anymore. But Allison was no longer there at the ranch. It seemed she had vanished, leaving him behind forever. He tried calling her, but the line remained hauntingly silent. If she didn't give him even the slightest chance, then he would have no choice but to let her go. Yet, the reality was nothing like he had imagined. Allison had been busy helping a neighbor with hospital arrangements, but only his brother had managed to find her there. Because the neighbor didn't want to be a burden to anyone else, he had only reached out to him alone. He then stepped aside, leaving the moment for the two young souls. He had always harbored a deep affection for Allison. It was a truth they both silently understood, but he knew that if he didn't choose to step back, he would never see the woman he loved truly happy. He didn't want any tension between him and his brother to be the reason Allison considered leaving. As long as she stayed, his heart would be at peace. He no longer resented his brother for being so rigid and unromantic, because since Allison's arrival, his brother, once as unchanging as the eternal stars, could now bring surprises as breathtaking as a shooting star. He finally believed that his brother could give Allison the happiness she deserved. In his eyes, the two of them were truly the most perfect match. It was the time for the town's annual music festival. Every year, The celebration was full of life and joy. It was the one moment when everyone could truly relax. Yet, amidst the bustling crowd, a little girl was nervously waiting for her dance partner. She took the little boy's small hand in hers, and with a heart full of hope, she began to dance, performing the steps she had only just learned. However, watching this tender scene caused a man nearby to drift into a deep, aching longing, and just at that very moment, a solitary woman walked slowly into view. She gazed around at the familiar sight, smiling happily as she caught sight of the little girl dancing. And then, she saw the man who had been yearning for her. She still had that same beautiful, radiant smile, and he was still the same man, who struggled to find the right words to say.